I would like to recognize the Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, let me say first that I say not just on behalf of our own caucus, but I'm sure on behalf of all the members of the House that it is a privilege for us to be able together to acknowledge the significance of your position in the chair. And we welcome you to that position. Now I'm happy to address a few comments to the speech from the throne as it was presented to us on Tuesday. It is, to make a long story short, it is rather a strange document with so much absent from it that needs to be present, and at the same time so much present in it that it would be better if it weren't. So the glaring absence, as has been noted, of course, is the housing crisis. My colleague, the leader of the Liberal Party, I thought was excessively generous when commenting on the speech a couple of days ago, said that he found it light on housing. Light, okay, for sure. One poor little defenseless sentence on housing and the subject. A poor little defenseless sentence unsupported by any points, by any indication of a program, by any plans, and that sentence just a little secondary part of another paragraph that's on another subject altogether. Now, why wouldn't any regular person who was following the speeches being read on Tuesday, why wouldn't they, as they listened to it and they noted that it had plans and programs and purposes on environmental things, and plans and purposes and programs on health care things, and plans and purposes and programs on things related to democratic accountability, and then they would come to this measly, sad, single, lone, shivering housing sentence. Why wouldn't they then conclude that the authors of this document were not people for whom housing was a great deal of priority? Why wouldn't they conclude that the authors of the document were not people for whom housing was something that was animating all their thinking about the future of Nova Scotia, was not driving their energy, and was not for them a matter of priority? Of course that's what they would conclude. And as a matter of fact, I think it's a pretty reasonable conclusion, not just about the speech, but also about the work to this point of the government that this speech stands for. Yes, this little shivering, isolated sentence on housing in the speech from the throne says something that is true. It says, I quote, "We are in a housing crisis." Well, one of that crisis' most sharp dimensions is, of course, the sudden, arbitrary, dramatic, escalating rent. We know that 20% of our province's renters are paying more than 50% of their income for their shelter. We know that rent for a one-bedroom apartment in this city has gone up 20% year over year this year here in Halifax. And we know that when people come to our constituency offices, as they do, with notices of rent increases that are in the hundreds of dollars, and they're in great dismay, and in the course of talking to us, there's one thing they always say. They say, they can't do that, can they? And we have to tell them that unless you have permanent rent control, at the end of the temporary rent cap, unfortunately, in fact, they can. And I say unfortunately because they can't do that in British Columbia. They can't do that in Ontario. It's illegal to do that in Manitoba. It's against the law to do that in Quebec. You can't do it in PEI, but landlords can do it in Nova Scotia. It is legal. It is a part of our system in our province because this government will not extend to the people of Nova Scotia the protections that are already today extended to a majority of people in our country. So the sad little shivering, isolated housing sentence in the speech from the throne, it reflects something very significant. It reflects a lack of commitment, focus, and priority on the housing crisis, which is in fact the case. But I know, wait, the government answers. Just hang on there. No, we have a plan. It's coming. Now, you will pardon me, Mixed Speaker, if I don't just take my leave hearing that and run up to Dublin and Chebucto and holler out, everybody gather round, good news, it's all going to be okay. The Conservatives say they have a plan. It's coming. And you'll excuse me, Mixed Speaker, if I don't go back to all those doors I knocked on this summer where the parent told me about the kids being in the basement a lot longer than they'd planned because the down payment keeps moving away from something that they can grasp. You'll excuse me if I don't go back to those homes, knock on the door and pop open a bottle of champagne and say, good news! Guess what? The Conservatives have a plan. It's coming. And you'll let me off the hook, Mixed Speaker, if I don't send an email to every one of the constituents who has contacted me out of fear for their rental situations and say, oh, good news, Conservatives have a plan, it's coming. I'm not going to do that, Mixed Speaker, because there is a place for a government's plan. There is a place for a government's program. There is a place for those things that a government is prepared to stand on and to bring forward and to set out. The name of that place is the speech from the throne. And in this one, the housing crisis is an absence.